Maybe I'll just wait another minute.
Sounds great.
So I can't see the participant list when I'm in the presenter mode. So let me know if there's anything I should know about, Anna.
Yes, I will monitor raised hands in the chat and let you know when folks want to chime in and ask questions and things like that.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the BOG meeting, the second quarterly BOG meeting of this year. So this is really getting us on our quarterly meeting schedule, which is a new thing this year. So Anna gave a good introduction on logistics. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call, and I'll go in the order of the groups listed on the slide here. So first, peer review panel members. I saw one. So if you could just announce yourselves. Just name and affiliation.
This is Bruce Monson, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Or am I included in that peer review panel?
That's you, yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm here.
Great to have you, Bruce. This meeting, I told the panel that it's optional for them, so thanks, Bruce, for opting in. Do we have EPA in our virtual room?
Yes, you do. This is Terry Fleming.
Excellent.
AJ.
Hi. OEHA?
Susan Clazing.
Lori Chumney.
Great. Moss Landing. I know Autumn Bonema is not available for this meeting.
I just saw Wes come in.
And I thought I saw Marco on the list before I went into this presenter mode. Is that right? Did I see Marco? All right, well, I think we're capturing people from the participant list as well, right, Anna?
Yes.
Maybe Marco stepped away. Okay, regional, we'll go through the regional boards. Region 1.
Mary Bartholomew.
Region 2. Region 3. Region 4.
Hi, this is Emily Duncan.
Emily. Region 5.
Lauren Smitherman.
Robin Murad.
Right, Region 6.
Morning, this is Lori Screeb.
Region 7.
Morning, Jeff Rossi.
Region 8.
Morning, this is Heather Boyd.
Right, Region 9.
Chad Walker here, good morning.
Okay, thanks regions. State Board.
Tessa Fojic.
Jennifer Salt. Did you get that, Jay?
I didn't hear the last.
I got you, Jennifer.
And it was Tessa too.
Right, and that's Jennifer Salisbury, for those who don't know Jennifer's full name. There are a lot of, I did see a lot of new names on the participant list, so it's good to sort of introduce everybody carefully. Anybody else from the State Board?
Michelle Tang, Swamp.
Devin Burke.
Chad Fearing.
Great. And actually, since there are names on the call that I didn't recognize, I'm Jay Davis with the San Francisco Estuary Institute, also known as the Aquatic Science Center, and I'm the co-chair of the Bioaccumulation Oversight Group. So, if you're in the other category, as it says in the slide, please be sure to add your name and affiliation into the chat box so we have a good record of everybody who was on the call. Okay, so let's take a look at the agenda for the day. So we did the roll call. We're reviewing the agenda now. As we always do, we will have a series of brief updates on different parts of the program, the bioaccumulation monitoring program, and related activities. I'm going to give brief updates on a report that's in production, the 2016 Lakes Data Report, then an update on the sampling plan for this year. And then we'll talk about planning for next year and beyond, and looking at the budget that's available, and thinking about strategically about how to make the best use of the available budget. Then we'll take a break at 11, and then we'll switch over to items that Anna, the co-chair of the BOG, is going to be leading. Talking about rebranding the BOG, outreach materials, and then an update on the BOG realignment, which is a community engagement effort, and then we'll wrap up. Any questions about the agenda? All right.
I don't see anything in the chat, just lots of folks introducing themselves, which thank you for that.
Great. All right, well, let's move along to item 2 and the quick updates. So I said this already, but and we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting in January, but we didn't have, I don't think we had total clarity about it. So I want to formally announce and welcome Anna as the co-chair of this group. It's great to have Anna on board. She's going to be leading the charge on the realignment effort, but then also she's contributing just in general to our activities, the administrative aspects, the planning and technical aspects of the bioaccumulation monitoring. So I'm really glad to have Anna teaming with me and co-chairing the group. So you want to add anything, Anna?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I'm excited to keep pushing and working with you to keep pushing this group forward. The work is awesome and exciting, and there's a lot to do. So having a team is, I think, gonna make things a lot easier for everyone. Thanks, Jay.
Absolutely, yeah, and we are taking on this new element with community engagement, and it's definitely going to take a team. So, and it's also just great to have you helping out in general. I think we'll take the BOG to a higher level. So excited about that. Then just running through the different monitoring years, we're always working kind of with some elements that from past monitoring. Then there's the current monitoring year, And then, we plan ahead for future years. So we've always got, I want to say a foot, but then we would have 3 feet and that wouldn't make sense. But we're always working past, present, and future. So one of the past items that remains to be checked off is the 2016 report. That'll be the next agenda item. Then 2018, we sampled the coast, and we produced a write-up on that at the end of last year. Karen McLaughlin from SQUIRP was the lead author. This was a partnership with the Southern California Bite Monitoring Program. And Karen has turned that technical report into a manuscript that's been accepted in Marine Pollution Bulletin and is currently being revised and will be resubmitted. So we're taking that reporting on that work to the next level and getting it published in the peer-reviewed literature. So that's great. Karen has led the effort on that. 2019, in the other odd years, we sample bass lakes, and we did that in 2019. The data are still being processed, and then we'll produce a report on that later this year. I need to coordinate with the state board on the details of getting the data set completed so that we can produce a data report on that and put those data on the make them publicly accessible through the portal. In 2020, it was a shortened year, but we did some sampling on the coast. The coast sampling and normally I would have Autumn give an update on the progress in analyzing those samples from last year and getting the data to the state board. But Autumn is one of the other co-leaders of this overall monitoring effort, and she's not available for the call today. So we don't have that. This year we're sampling bass lakes again at the 4th round of bass lake sampling. We'll be talking about the sampling plan later. I don't know. I think the sampling team members are not available. Do you see any of them on the call, Anna?
I haven't looked that closely. I've been letting people in, but if they are here.
Gary or Billy, are you on the call?
I don't see them.
All right. Well, sampling has begun. The first couple of lakes were sampled in mid-May, and Gary Ichikawa is usually the one who reports on a weekly basis the activities that they've been undertaking and reports on the catch. And so we got our first report from Gary a couple weeks ago with that beginning of sampling. It's going to be a challenging year because of the dry conditions, and we'll talk more about this later. But they were able to sample one of the lakes that it initially looked like they weren't going to be able to sample, but they wanted to do that early so that the water levels, didn't get any lower and make it unsamplable. So sampling's underway, and these updates on sampling go out to the email list. So if you're interested in those and not getting them, let me or Anna know. We'll make sure you're on the list for that. Okay, we always like to get an update from OEHA on their latest advisories. One of the things that one of the goals of our monitoring is to inform consumption advisories, and we've done quite a bit of that in partnership with OEHA. Susan, do you have a quick update?
Yeah, Lori Chumney's going to handle that.
Okay, great.
Hi, Jay. This is Lori. And we've released an update for Silverwood Lake.
Great. You guys are good about getting, sending announcements of those advisories and advisory updates out. We forward those to the BOG list, I believe, or you guys send them to the BOG list. I know email list, you'll be getting those. Do we have any updates on TMDLs?
I know Carrie is not going to be able to join us today, and I think she usually gives that update. So we might not hear anything about that today.
Well, Lauren can you say anything about the Delta?
Yeah, hi, this is Lauren Smitherman, Region 5. We are still plugging away on the Delta Mercury TMDL review, just really in the data analysis part right now, revising really the data gathering stage, making sure that the data set is in tip-top condition so that we can easily perform the subsequent analyses. So looking at linkage analysis again, source analysis again, really all parts of the TMDL. So just, knee deep in data for that. We have a few other TMDLs on the docket, but right now we're really focused on the Delta. And a no update for the statewide mercury control program for reservoirs.
Okay, great. Thanks for adding that in. All right, regarding the Monitoring Council and the symposium, Anna, I'll let you lead that.
Sure. Thanks, Jay. For the Monitoring Council, I know the director, Nick Martirano, is actually out on leave, and he will be for a little while, but I think I'm going to put you on the spot here, Peter. Our council liaison is on the call, and I just wanted to make some space if Peter Broom had any updates that he wanted to share with us. If not, that's okay.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. This is Peter Broom. I represent the water supply sector on the Water Quality Monitoring Council. I didn't really have anything prepared, so I'm kind of on the spot, but I just that's okay. That I am always interested to be participating in these meetings as a representative of the council, and we have the opportunity to report back about all the good work that you guys are doing during the quarterly council meetings. So if there is anything that anybody ever wants to talk to me about, to report back to the council, please feel free to contact Jay or Anna, and they can relay information to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, sorry about that. I saw your name and went, oh, I wonder if he worked with Nick, but put you on the spot. Thanks.
Sure.
So for the California Water Data Science Symposium, y'all have heard me talk about this many, many times, but it's coming up quick. The draft agenda is posted on the website, which was linked in our agenda, and then it'll also be linked in the notes. And there's lots of stuff going on, from a tribal film screening to the regular traditional symposia and talks on a range of topics. And then we're going to also have a speaker kind of closing the day or closing the event, and we'll be talking about tribal data sovereignty and the nexus of environmental justice and racial equity and water data, and where we agencies, the water data community, fit into all that. So there's going to be lots of great stuff on the agenda, and we're using Zoom webinar, so the registration, you have to register for each event or day. So there's a couple of different types of registration. And there's also going to be a data workshop hosted and shepherded by our USGS partners to talk about their Bay Delta data sandbox. So if you're interested in Delta data, that's a great thing. And I think they're looking for that to be definitely more of a workshop vibe and less of a symposia or talk. So hopefully lots of opportunities to engage. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Okay.
Great. Off the top of your head, are there any bioaccumulation presentations on the agenda?
I didn't see any bioaccumulation talks. So next year, we got to do better as a community to get on that agenda. And Sherry, I see your question. Who are we working with on tribal data sovereignty? Great question. We are going to be hearing from Dr. Lydia Jennings, who is in Arizona, and she gave a talk at NC's. I can look up that acronym. I remember the acronym, but not the soup, and add that in there. And she's going to kind of give us a crash course on what the heck that is and what it means and how we meet, how we can respect it and contribute to it as a community. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Anna. And for those who are new to these meetings, I'll give a little more background on what this group does and why we're talking about the Monitoring Council. This group has a dual role. It originated as a subcommittee of SWAMP to guide the bioaccumulation monitoring, the statewide monitoring that SWAMP does, the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program. But then a few years after that, the California Water Quality Monitoring Council started, and then this group became also a work group of the council. So we've got a dual role. We focus a lot on the monitoring, and this meeting today is mainly focused on monitoring, but we also support the Monitoring Council on bioaccumulation topics. Okay. So I think that's it for the updates. Well, unless anybody else has any other announcements that weren't on our radar.
And feel free to unmute yourself, or if you're familiar with Teams, you can, there's a little smiley face with a hand, you can raise your hand, just so we aren't all talking over each other, but so far it looks pretty quiet.
All right. I hope it's not, speaking of quiet, it's that they are hammering over next door, so let me know if it's getting to be a problem.
Oh, wait, I don't hear anything, so
okay,
you're
good, because they are hammering right now. All right, let's go on to item 3, the 2016 Lakes Data Report, and as a bigger picture background, this is obviously we're 5 years out from this monitoring. This is an overdue report. There's a couple reasons for that. One is just there was a sort of a backlog of prior year reports that accumulated, and at the end of last year, those of you who have been around a little bit will recall that we finished the 2015 and 2017 data reports, the Bass Lake data reports, but this is the last one to get finalized here. And then also we had a pretty lengthy delay in activity due to the contracting issues. So there's a couple reasons for this, but the main one was just that there was a kind of overload of planning and reports and things, and this is the last piece to get done. And I had a plan to get this draft report out before this meeting, but hit some snags as I was getting to what I thought was near the finish line. Kind of halfway through writing up the results, I noticed that there were some missing data points from some of the graphs, and I want to fix that. But it's been since this was on the shelf for a couple years, the people that produce the graphs have left my organization. So we're regrouping. I'm getting somebody else to dig through the files and find these figures and tables and update them. So I didn't quite get it done before the meeting, but I'm planning to get the report distributed by the end of next week, June 4th, and then I'll give you all 3 weeks to comment. So this is just a data report. It's a simple report without interpretation, just to document what, the data set, the methods, what we did, and the results that we got. So I'm going to just do a quick run through of the report, just to refresh memories for people who have been around for a while, and then it'll be an introduction to this data set for those of you who are new. So in 2016, we started the long-term bass lake monitoring in 2015, and we were doing it kind of an assortment of different studies before that. And 2016, we decided that the best use of the bioaccumulation monitoring funds was to address some data gaps, some additional data gaps for lakes. There are thousands of lakes in California, and we've done a good job of sampling the highest priority lakes, but there's still a lot that haven't been sampled. And then there were other lakes where there'd been some sampling, but there were still data gaps with regard to regulation by the water boards or developing fish consumption advisories. So this study included some sampling of unsampled lakes and then filling some of these data gaps to meet the data needs for the regional water boards and OEHA. And the design for the new lakes followed the approach that we used in 2007 and 8. Those were the first 2 years of BOG monitoring, where we did a big statewide survey of lakes, sampled almost 300 lakes, and using consistent approach. Regional boards and from OEHA on what data they wanted to get for those lakes. And then just for the review panel members and others who have been around for a while, we've refined the design as we've gone along, and a couple of things that we added in recent years were sampling of prey fish, small fish that are wild prey for wildlife. But there's a water quality objective. We analyze mainly mercury in these prey fish, and they're very helpful in helping us understand the degree of bioaccumulation, mercury bioaccumulation, and contamination in food webs in these lakes. And then we also added selenium relatively recently to basically help interpret the mercury mercury data, and we added this to our sport fish, but then also the prey fish, because there's a relationship between selenium and mercury bioaccumulation. So in this survey, we sampled 35 lakes. 35 lakes were on the list for 2016, and then we sampled a couple of other lakes that were left over from the 2015 effort that we couldn't sample in 2015, but were able to sample in 2016. So they were spread pretty widely across the state. As usual, our primary focus is on largemouth bass. They're an excellent indicator species, and we've really seen this over the years, and we get very reproducible results. But one of the keys for doing that is to make sure we take into effect the known effect of fish size and age on mercury accumulation. Larger, older fish have higher concentrations of mercury because they accumulate. The mercury accumulates over time, and then as the fish get larger, they're eating larger prey. So there's a consistent, strong relationship between size, which is shown here on the x-axis, the length of the fish in millimeters, and then the mercury concentration is shown on the y-axis. And this is showing all of the largemouth bass data that we collected. And you can see, if you look at any of the individual symbols, you can see this upward slope. And overall, you can see the sort of the tendency towards the larger fish having higher concentrations for the data set as a whole. And then we used that relationship of mercury to length to estimate a concentration at a common length of 350 millimeters, which is kind of in the middle of the size range that we get for largemouth bass. And then we used those length adjusted values for comparisons, for apples and apples comparisons across our stations and over time. If we didn't do that, and say, at a particular lake, we got a group of larger fish and compared that to a lake with smaller fish, it would look like the lake, even if the concentrations were really similar in these water bodies, the lake with larger fish would look like it was more contaminated. So we're able to factor out that length effect for our comparisons. So this is a standard type of map that we've generated over the years, showing comparing the mercury concentrations to thresholds from OEA. This is the map showing the thresholds for the more sensitive population, women of childbearing age and children. And we see, for mercury, we often see levels that are above the advisory tissue level associated with no consumption advice. OEA goes through a process that doesn't just exclusively compare concentrations to these thresholds. There's more to it than that, but just comparing our data to these thresholds and showing where they fall out. So we often see some red dots, and then the lowest threshold that we've mapped over the years is 0.07 parts per million, and generally we see very few lakes that are below that threshold, which is associated with the 3 serving per week rate of consumption. So mercury is a significant and widespread problem in fish in California water bodies. Using that length adjustment approach for largemouth bass, we've generated a strong data set for lakes throughout the state. And this graph is showing a bar for each of the 192 lakes that we had sampled as of 2016. And then the bars that are colored in with blue are for the lakes that were sampled in 2016. So you can see where they fit in the overall distribution. And we continue to update and add to this data set. But it's a handy way of seeing where the most recent data fit in overall. And some of the maximum and minimum concentrations. One of the higher ones this year was Coyote Lake, which was a lake that we revisited. There were a couple of new lakes with relatively high concentrations, Kent Lake and Stafford Lake. And then there were quite a few lakes at the low end because these were some of the lakes where the regions wanted follow-up and revisits. So we're getting a good understanding of mercury levels using this indicator species throughout California, and we have a good sense of what's high and what's low relative to, the population of lakes in California as a whole, and we can see, where these values fit in relative to thresholds.
It looks like we have a raised hand, Jay.
Okay.
Terry, what's going on?
Hey, Jay. So I remember about, maybe 10 years ago, there was an effort to begin to model mercury in lakes.
Yep.
The models were okay, but as we're getting more and more data, I'm wondering if there's an effort to sort of redo that and improve upon the models that were developed back then.
And in that study, we collected other data along with the fish data to try to develop a model to see if we could identify factors that correlate. And it's a significantly more expensive data, the water data, the sediment data, and so we haven't been collecting those data in recent years. There are some other landscape variables that could be looked at, without the expense of collecting other water and sediment data. But there's that will only get you so far, to really understand, to really develop a good model, you need some of those ancillary parameters. So that's kind of where we are currently. We haven't done more on it. But if anybody's interested in that, the report from 2014 is the one to look at. And if you're interested, let me know, and I'll get you that report.
That's the Clean Lake Study report from 2014, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay. I have that in the notes, and I'll see if I can provide a link to it.
Great.
Thanks.
And then we can also compare these length-adjusted largemouth bass concentrations over time. And I'm just showing a couple of the graphs. There are where we did, where we were revisiting. And Coyote Lake was the lake with the highest concentration, and it's consistent with what was measured there in 2008. and the means are very similar. These graphs show the mean and the 95% confidence interval of the mean, and so these confidence intervals overlap. So suggesting in the concentration that we measured in 2016 versus 2008 for both of these lakes. And if looking at all of the lakes that were revisits, we had 7. All of them similarly showed no difference between the 2016 mean and the mean measured in the previous monitoring. So and this has been generally true that we see very consistent measurements over time, very consistent mean concentrations. In 2015 and 16, if you look at if you combine those 2 years, we had about 25 lakes that were revisits. Over 15 had no change. There were 8 that had a decrease, and then 1 that had more than 2 years and seemed to be going up and down. We've done a couple more rounds of sampling since then, and one of the things that we did in the 2017 report, we updated this, so that is available, and you can get a more complete story, and then when we do this the report for 2019, we'll update this again. So there appears to be a high degree of consistency in these lakes over the years, which suggests that we do see differences between lakes. Some lakes, like you saw the range that we observed in 2016 alone. Coyote Lake at the high end and a bunch of lakes down below 0.07. So it appears that these differences are due to properties that are stable over time. The lakes aren't bouncing around a lot when you use this good indicator. So this suggests that we should be able to develop a model. If we had the right data set to plug into a model, we should be able to figure out why these lakes have these substantial differences between the high and the low. That was another problem with the Clean Lake study, that we focused on the cleaner end of the spectrum and didn't have a lot of data from lakes with higher levels that would give a clearer contrast and help identify factors that cause these differences. Okay, I'm going to skip these last couple slides, but just very quickly, Lake Spalding, we didn't get largemouth, but we got pike minnow, and they were very high in mercury. And then some of the higher PCB the highest PCB concentrations that we saw were from the reservoirs listed here, and PCBs correlate with the fat content or lipid content of the fish, and that was we saw some relatively high lipid that was part of the explanation for these high PCB levels. Okay, so the timeline for this, these data are already on the portal and in CEDN. That happened a long time ago. We just need to finish this data report, and I mentioned the timeline here. Show the timeline here that I mentioned earlier. So that's the quick overview of and preview, and look for that in your email at the end of next week. Any questions or comments?
I don't see anything in the chat.
All right. All right. Well, let's keep rolling along then. So the next item is the sampling plan for 2021, this current year. And I sent we decided to document the changes in the Bass Lake monitoring by preparing a sampling plan update. And I sent this out to the work group on April 20th. I did get comments from a few folks. The peer reviewers provided comments, mostly minor things. I'll give a quick summary of them. And so I'll be updating this document based on their feedback and the latest information on lake accessibility. And then, we'll finalize that and post it on the website for documentation of our work this year. So this item, I'm just giving an update on what's happened, what happened with that report and what's happening with the sampling plan for this year. So this slide is really kind of more for reference for those who look at the slides after the meeting, but there's a trail of documentation on this in our meeting discussions. So a quick refresher on this sampling plan update. We decided to provide this update with that can be accessed along with other sampling plan documents on the website to provide a clear record of what we're doing, and so it could be cited in the QAPP. So the document, this update has a preface with some explanation of what the document is, and then provides updated figures and tables describing the design. It's got the original plan, which was developed in 2015, and appended to it, and then it's it'll have a cover and document number, so it can be searched and found on the website. So the comments that I received, one of the things that's different is that we're getting a new PCB, a new lab to do the PCB analysis, and this new lab's going to analyze all 209 PCB congeners. So there was a couple questions and clarifications related to that. And then there were an assortment of other minor clarifications and typos in errata. The general theme is that clarifying some of the things that have been changed in this version of the sampling plan relative to the past. There were like some of the tables that were marked up where it wasn't clear. The changes that were made weren't clear, so I'll fix that. And then another important step is that Autumn Bonema from Moss Landing, who I mentioned earlier, she's one of the co-leads of this work, was on leave for an extended period, and she just got back and has not given me her review comments on this. So I want to make sure that she doesn't see anything wrong with it, or we can fix anything she notices. So that's an important step before we finalize it. So we'll talk about this more in the next item, but another development in the January meeting is that we've been working through the budget and
Hey,
trying to, yes.
Sorry, before we move on, it looks like Jennifer has a question.
Yes.
Hi, Jay. Can you go back 2 slides, please?
This one?
So, yeah. So just kind of like I just kind of want to put this in your ear just so that, so if the sampling plan is a new sampling plan for 2021, we'll also need to make sure that that ends up being added to the database because it's part of the protocol codes. So once it's like, I know Autumn's not in the meeting, but once it's like finished, I'm going to also need to make sure that, because it'll end up being part of the new data.
Great. Thanks for pointing that out. Making a note of it. Okay, so we did some budget number crunching to figure out what we could afford, how many lakes we could afford to include in this year's survey. We had, we've got, with this Bass Lake monitoring, we have our set list of, we call them panels. For this study, we identified approximately 190 lakes that we wanted to sample that were high priority for the water boards, the regional boards, and we split them up into 5 groups. And then what we've been able to do in the past was to add other lakes that where there were data needs expressed by the water boards. And then another thing we routinely do is we make sure that when we're out visiting these water bodies that we fill any data gaps that OEHA has for advice for those water bodies. So we figured, we were able to determine that the price tag for including the 4th panel plus the OEHA add-ons plus the additional lakes was way too high, more than we could really afford with our budget. So we kind of cut back to just the panel 4 and the OEHA add-ons is what is really affordable within our budget. And then again, we'll talk about this more in the next item, but the plan that we've come up with, we want to talk about with you all today is we want to prioritize those OEHA add-ons and fill those data gaps for advisories. So that's a priority. And this is guidance coming from the state board. And then another priority is completing the 5 Bass Lake panels. So we're on panel 4. There's one more. And then I'll save more discussion on that later. But even with scaling back, like not sampling those additional lakes, we still need to borrow from, actually, do I have that right? Yeah, fiscal year 21-22 from the next fiscal year to cover what we're doing this year. So again, we'll dive more deeply into the budget stuff later, but it's description of how it affected the plan for this year. And then, so we had this was the list of extra lakes. So going beyond panel 4, but into other lakes that are priorities for the regions. And we were only able to keep 2 of these, and we kept these 2 because Region 2 and Region 9 are contributing funds to the pot this year, and these are the priorities that they have, the priority additions. And there have been some deletions from the panel 4 list that are helping make it possible to include Lafayette Reservoir and Diamond Valley. So unfortunately, we weren't able to go down this list. But as I mentioned earlier, it's a very dry year, and time will tell whether there are other lakes where we have access issues. So it's possible that if there are other deletions from panel 4, that if any of these lakes are like a really important priority, let me know, and they can be on the waiting list in case other lakes, in case enough other lakes get deleted. Now we have to weigh that against the fact that we're already borrowing from the next fiscal year, so it would need to be an urgent priority to get included this year. And then this was captured in the update material that I sent, but we've run into some issues with lakes being dry. Another reservoir had multiple issues. It's on private land and also has issues with being dry. One of the lakes that I was referring to earlier, Shadow Cliffs Reservoir in Region 2, there was it looked like we weren't going to be able to sample, but this was the lake that was successfully sampled the week of May 10th, that they wanted to sample early so that they could get it in. Okay, and then the timeline for this is to finalize it after Autumn finishes her review. Make sure we have all the details right. Okay, so that's my summary of the sampling plan update. Any questions or comments on that?
Don't see anything in the chat.
All right. Okay, cool. Well, we're doing good on time. And we've got, this is an important item. It's not a long presentation, but it has a big bearing on the future of what we're doing in our bioaccumulation monitoring. So we allocated a half hour for it, and I hope to hear your input, because it is, again, an important topic. So I mentioned the budget challenges. We've got a lot of monitoring needs that we're considering and trying to fit into the available funding. We want to complete the current coast survey, which we were planning to do, complete it next year. We also, I'm going to jump down to the third bullet. Our long-term plan and our input from Region 5, there's a strong interest in need for updated data from river stations in the Central Valley to support development of a TMDL for the Central Valley rivers. So this is something that would be, it's been planned as part of the BOG budget, and we want to try to fit that in. Is one of the things that we use our budget for. Region 5 is going to be able to contribute funds to support that as well. So they're putting their money where their mouth is in terms of the urgency of this. So that's another thing that we want to be able to fit in that was slated for 2022. Another thing I'm going to go, the realignment. Part of our budget is dedicated to supporting realignment. So we're engaging with community groups and getting information on their information needs, and then we want to do monitoring, monitoring to address those information needs. So there's part of the budget that we're just setting aside, dedicating to that, but that's another part of the overall monitoring picture for next year and annually after that. And then another sampling effort that it's not you know, it's not really affected by our, or doesn't affect our budget for the bioaccumulation monitoring by swamp, but it affects lakes assessment. So, well, I want to discuss these priorities with you and get your input. Hoping that you think we're on the right track. So I came up with this is actually a very simplified version of the budget, but kind of illustrates the challenge that we're facing. So it's breaks out the different fiscal years, and then the amount that we have available for the sort of traditional monitoring, the non-realignment monitoring, and everything that goes with it, including my work as the BOG co-chair and coordinating and planning, Autumn's work in coordinating and planning. We have $450,000 per year that covers that, plus all the sampling and analysis. For the realignment, we have $200,000 that's in a separate pot. It's gonna be covering the realignment work. And actually a small part of the 450 is going to community engagement work as well. And then we pay our peer reviewers as well, and that comes out of the 450. But we've got this, annually we've got this 450 to work with. For this first fiscal year, the funds covered the coast monitoring that we did last year. And last year was a shortened sampling season because of the contract not kicking in until July, if I'm remembering the timing right. So we spent less than 450,000 last year. We spent 345. What we need for this year, with the panel 4 lakes, without the additional lakes, but with the filling the OEHA requests, the OEHA add-ons, as we refer to them, we need 680,000. There's 105,000 left over from fiscal year 2021, so that's contributing. And then Region 2 and Region 9, I mentioned that they're kicking in funds for this effort this year because they've got some requests to include, and so that adds to the 450 available. But these amounts don't cover the 680. We need to borrow 185 from next fiscal year to cover panel 4. And I want to mention that these numbers, Autumn is really the budget queen. So these numbers are preliminary. Autumn hasn't seen the slide yet, but they give you the general picture though, even if I got anything a little wrong, that we need to borrow from the next fiscal year to cover panel 4, the way we've laid it out. And then for the next fiscal year, we'll have our, this amount will be depleted by whatever we borrow. But we want to figure out how to, what we can do. We want to, our plan that we've been talking about for years now is to get back to rivers in 2022, and then we still need to finish off the coast. And as I mentioned, Region 5 I just heard from Lauren that they will be able to contribute 40,000 to cover river monitoring, the river monitoring that they need to support the TMDL. This probably isn't enough to cover all the monitoring that they need, but I think it would cover a pretty good chunk of it. So the bottom line is that it looks like the solution here is to, if we want to include the rivers, and follow through on the plan that we've laid out, and we've already started on this for panel 4, that we need to spread the coast work out into 2 more years, in not just this fiscal year, but not just 2022, but 2024 as well. So spreading work over more years, it's not ideal, but it is a good strategy for dealing with a limited budget in a long-term program.
And it looks like Terry has a question.
Yes.
I am concerned about putting off the coastal so much longer, right? And the part you're finishing off is the northern part of the coast, if I recall. And
Right.
That's the area that had the highest mercury concentrations. And so it just seems that, putting it off 4 years is not wise.
Yeah, that's definitely a disadvantage of spreading it. What I want to do today is sort of tee this up for a more definitive discussion when we've got the actual budget numbers worked out better. I don't think we have to see exactly what Region 5 needs for the rivers, and then how far we can go with the remaining funds on the coast. I don't have a great handle on that yet, but we'll get a more definitive assessment and then have that discussion.
Jay, this is Sherry from the California Indian Environmental Alliance. Thanks for letting me join today. Part of why I want to join is we're part of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network that's been funded by OPC. The tribes on the northern, it's from basically Sonoma County up. They are sampling, and SIA has some funding to augment their sample. So there could be possibility for either coordinating, augmenting, giving some funds to your team or something. So touch base with me, and then I did the same. Put a comment for Central Valley. So there might be some support we can provide, and whoever does the sampling, whether we do it and it's done so that it works for you, or whether your team does it and we give you funding, we can talk about that.
Excellent. That's great to hear, and I will gladly follow up with you.
Cool. And it looks like Lauren's got her hands raised.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering if any other regions are slated to do the river sampling in 2022 as well, because I wanted to definitely coordinate with the other regions as well and make sure that if we're doing an effort that, we can get some long-term trends statewide. So just kind of figuring out if everyone's going to be doing it at once or if it would just be a Central Valley specific effort for 2022. But I guess it also depends on what the amount of budget is left over as well. So.
Right. The way, just to elaborate a little bit, the way I've been thinking about it is that we could, given the limited budget, that we could fit in the rivers, but when we did the rivers, the statewide river survey in 2011, we looked at 60 sites across the state. A lot of them were at higher elevation and were trout sites. So given the budget limitations, I've been thinking of how to fit in just the rivers that you need for the TMDL on the valley floor, and not to, which would be, maybe like 10 or 12 stations,
Right.
and some of which could, some of those would be covered by that 40K from Region 5, and then also we would need to decide what to do in the Delta, where there's pretty thorough monitoring happening already. So a lot, there's a good chunk of the valley floor that's covered, but that is an assumption that I've been envisioning, that we focus the rivers on the valley floor and not the other stations that we sampled last time.
Yeah, from the region's perspective, it would be great to have a good overview of what's going on across the region. But if we had to, I just don't know what the BOG is able to support. So, we're trying to support you somewhat, but I also don't know what we can work with. So, having a limited design on the valley floor, that's definitely a start, but it would be a preference if we're doing the Central Valley rivers to go up into the tributaries and see what those concentrations are and how they've changed over time. So a good goal is to say, yeah, we'd love to repeat what was done in 2011 to see the long-term changes and go from there. But once again, that 40,000 I know is not going to extend up into the tributaries. So yeah, I think this is just a longer conversation because we don't know what the numbers are going to look like for the rivers with the competing priorities.
Right. Well put. Okay, yeah, and it's good to get these concerns and out on the table so that we can work through them and figure out the best use of the funds. And it's great to hear Sherry's comment about the possibility of collaborating and being able to do more that way.
And it looks like Terry's got his hand raised again.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jay, I know on the National Lakes assessment, you had compared them to the panels and there wasn't a whole lot of overlap, but I'm wondering if there's some overlap between the National Lakes and the water bodies that the regions want.
The rivers?
No, the lakes.
Oh, you mean the extra lake list?
Yep.
I haven't looked at that specifically, but we'll take a look at that.
Yeah. And then, if there is overlap, then there's an opportunity to piggyback and save some money.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll do. For the National Lakes Assessment, that includes mercury and PCBs?
No, the National Lakes Assessments is really, they're just looking at PFOS, and PFOA, and 32 lakes. But if, the Moss Landing is going to be out there sampling fish,
Yeah, that's 85% of the cost. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We'll follow up on that. Then I have a couple other slides. I'm happy to have you guys ask your questions as we go, make your comments as we go. So those of you longer term boggers will recognize this table that lays out our long-term plan. So this is I updated this for the meeting today again, this is subject to discussion, but this is the latest draft that has the coast in 2022. I added 2024, but this will be, I should put this in, the bold is a solid plan and the non-bold is tentative, and I should make this tentative because we're going to talk about that and try to fit in the coast in 2022 if we can. Another thing I made, I changed is that we've been doing the budget for the Bass Lake work has worked out for the, over the past few rounds, kind of due to quirky budget overlaps and situations. So we've been able to, for the last couple rounds, we were able to do the panel plus additional lakes with a lot of OEHA add-ons, without sort of limiting the OEHA add-ons. But it's 450,000 isn't going to support that going forward. So I made these non-bold because we will need to reassess what we can do with 450,000 per year going forward. So a lot of discussion, longer discussion to be had, but this is the sort of thing that we'll need to figure out. So this is our straw man plan at this point, spreading the coast survey into 2024, if that's necessary, including the valley rivers in 2022, completing panel 5. So there's one more panel that I'm proposing that we follow through on that with the same sort of level of effort that we've used for the first 4 panels, and then we'll have a complete set, including the OEHI add-ons. So that'll, when we do that in 2023, that'll be a relatively, big ticket item that will probably draw from other fiscal years again. But it would give us the full set of the panels. And then, we'll be able to write that up and have a nice full round of sampling of those 190 lakes. But then, again, we can't, we may, subject to discussion, we may not be able to sustain that same level of effort going forward. So we'll need to reassess that. And all the monitoring elements to make it fit within the budget. And then we're regarding this realignment 200,000 as a separate thing that, doesn't get pulled into these, this other statewide monitoring.
Yeah, so just on the realignment, I think Jay and Autumn and I have talked very in depth about the realignment of the budget and all of that, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that. So the objective of the realignment is to do an intentional, gut check and assessment and engagement with folks in each region. And so we're starting in Region 9 right now, but we'll be working our way through the region. So, we'll be able to use the funds for sampling in regions as they come up to their turn on the realignment. And right now we're keeping things totally separate because this is the first time we're doing it, and we're gonna learn a lot. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be this way forever. We'll know more next year after we complete the first kind of round of sampling. But just to note that the realignment funds aren't going to like a special place where no sampling exists. Like they'll still be contributing to the work group data and the program data and things like that. It'll just be region specific.
And targeted towards monitoring where these communities ask for it.
Yeah, and especially for subsistence and tribal and cultural purposes, which, that's kind of a data gap that our current sampling, plans have. Just that it is what it is. So we're trying to, use these funds to fill those data gaps in an intentional and conscious way.
Okay, so this is the last slide on this. I think the next steps are getting a more definitive handle on the budget, and then having a longer discussion to discuss priorities and make these decisions about coast, rivers, Bass Lakes going forward. But we've got a few minutes left with this item if there are more questions or comments right now.
Can I ask how the realignment budget was developed?
Yeah, you betcha. So we got the 200 number, and for those of you that have been around in this work group for a long time, kind of know this history. But a couple years ago, freshwater harmful algal blooms became a thing, an issue, and they needed funds, and so they borrowed those funds from our program budget, and that's kind of been the case for the past couple years. Last year, we got dedicated funds for a freshwater harmful algal bloom program, and so we're getting those borrowed funds back. And so that's where the 200,000 comes from, and we're excuse me, we're using it this year for engagement. I think one important note for the engagement. Sorry, Jay, I'm doing a realignment spiel on your agenda item, but one key component of engagement for us is also including equity and compensating tribes and community-based organizations for their contributions, instead of kind of perpetuating this habit that all governments have had of extracting information without reciprocation.
Right. I get all that, right? So I followed all of the history so far. I'm just trying to figure out how the 200 budget was determined. I mean, I know that it's payback, but why is $200 needed for this? What is the budget breakdown? Yeah, so depending, right now we're using the 200. We're setting aside all of it because we don't know what the needs are, because we haven't had a chance to speak to tribes and community groups and regions and figure out realistically what the priorities are, and what sampling needs to occur, and all of that. So I'm thinking of it as kind of like a buffer. And after this first round with the San Diego region, we'll have a better idea of what is needed. Although it's important to note that for the engagement component, thinking of like $90,000 a fiscal year for engagement specifically, that's a big chunk. I think it's fair and well deserved. So right now, we're using the 200 as that number because we're getting it back, and so it's not really quote unquote touching what the program would have already had if we didn't have the new FHAB funding. And so we're going to learn through this process, and we'll figure out if all 200 is necessary, and if we can, modify the program and the realignment efforts to be more complementary. We're going to learn all that through this process. But for now, we're keeping the 200 separate so we have room to learn. Okay, and then you said the outreach 90,000, is that going to be contracted out or something, or is that just staff?
No. So we will be compensating tribal members and community groups for their time. So through honorarium type process.
All right, thank you.
And Anna, you've got a breakdown that led to the 90,000. Maybe if you just explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So we touched base with our swamp community or citizen monitoring lead, and kind of got an idea of what community groups would see as a fair compensation for their effort and their time. And the number that was thrown around was, about $3,000 for 12 hours of engagement and work and things like that. And so we kind of use that as forming the amount of meetings and work that we're going to be requesting from the advisory committee members, as well as like how we're going to compensate them. And so for the 90,000, and this is my hope, is that that will pay for the engagement in one region, but then also we can start engagement in an additional region. Right now, the plan is to just focus on one region for 3 years, but we have been able to get support for a dedicated facilitator for the project, which will free us up to, do more with what little money we have. So I'm hoping, right now we're still only focusing on Region 9, but I'm hoping in the future we can kind of overlap realignment efforts with the engagement component. And again, that would also mean distributing the funds throughout regions as we're doing it. I don't have a clear plan yet because, again, we haven't done this before, so we have a lot to learn. But that's kind of the general vision.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've heard the generalities, but I haven't heard the specifics. So I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Thanks for asking that, Terry. I think we've been in generality world for quite some time, and we're slowly getting into more specifics. So there's that. And then Sherry, thanks so much for having me, making a note for me to reach out to you for working in the realignment. And so I will definitely follow up, and we can figure out, when collaboration will make sense. And then Petra Lee from DWR mentioned in the comments that paying community for their expertise is really important, and she's glad we're doing it. So yay, glad you agree.
Great, thanks, Anna. So we're down to a minute left for this item. I mentioned what I thought the next steps were: getting better handle on the budget, and then setting up a longer discussion at a future meeting. Any other thoughts before we wrap up and take our break?
This is Chad. I just wanted to mention that as part of the realignment process, we do expect that if there is a need for regional funds, we would contribute regional funds to that sampling. Just need to wait and see, how many sites and species are identified as part of the process.
Right. Yeah, I think that's could come in very handy if, as a kind of rule of thumb, roughly it's about $10,000 per station. So if 90 is going to the community engagement part, that would be another sample around 10 or 11 locations. So depending on how much input we get, that maybe that's enough, or maybe it's not. So.
But also keeping in mind that with the realignment, the focus isn't just on sport fish necessarily. Like, we're open to hearing about other needs. So shellfish, learning more about harmful algal bloom, toxicity in animals that are consumed by subsistence fishers and tribes of communities are also on the table and up for discussion. And we're partnering closely with the Freshwater Harmful Algal Bloom program, who have agreed to pay for all the sampling that's needed for that. We would, again, just need to do the expensive part of collecting the samples. And so, that estimate of $10,000 is good, and we're going to lean into that. But, we might need to adjust depending on what we hear from communities and tribes.
Yeah, it's probably a low estimate if we're thinking about a long list of species or other, shellfish and things. All right. Well, thanks for the sort of initial discussion of this, and there will be more to come. But I think for now we'll take a short break and reconvene at 10 past. All right. Bio break time.
For those who may be away from your workstations, we've got a couple minutes left on our break. So get that tea or coffee refill or the snack, and please start making your way, and we'll get started right at 11:10. And Jake, can you confirm that you can see my slides?
I can see. Great slide.
Great. Perfect.
Yep.
Thanks.
So you can save the chat, right?
Yeah, I have a record of it. And when I type up the notes, I kind of add comments and action items into the notes as well.
Great.
And you had hammering, I have mowing and blowing. Is that distracting? Can you hear that? Or is it just me?
I don't hear it.
Okay, great. All right, folks, we are going to get started. It's 11:10, and we got a lot to go over. So the next item is about rebranding the BOG. So for those who have been around for a while, you know, that's kind of what we refer to the work group and the bioaccumulation monitoring program. It's all mushed into one acronym. And the work group itself is commonly referred to as Bioaccumulation Oversight Group, or the BOG, as well as the Safe to Eat work group, which is more consistent with other work groups under the Water Quality Monitoring Council. So there's the Safe to Swim and the Safe to Drink work groups. And this is our work group is generally referred to as a Safe to Eat work group. And over the past year or so, even before I became the program coordinator of the Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program, definitely before I became co-chair of the BOG, I've heard discussions and concerns from this group about having a hard time engaging with non-work group members. And, you know, when you say, yeah, I'm part of the BOG, and communities that have not necessarily been part of the work group or the program in the past to improve you know, environmental justice and racial equity and all of those things. And so I'm proposing, and I hope y'all support, rebranding the BOG to the Safe to Eat work group. It's a little bit more approachable. It's already consistent with other council work groups. Would mean, so it's really just rebranding. We would revise the website. We have materials that we've been developing. So instead of having the BOG or the Bioaccumulation Oversight Group, we would refer to this work group as the Safe to Eat work group. And then future documentation and reports that refer to this work group would use Safe to Eat instead of the BOG. And so that's all it means, and that's all I'm proposing. And let's see, is there anything else? Yeah, I just am trying to get a feel for how the work group, and especially those that have been around and doing the work for, you know, almost 15 years now, like what your thoughts are. And so I see Sherry. You have your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself. What do you think?
Well, so the work that SIA does has to do with giving the fish consumption advice to doctors and nurses and stuff. And I see someone from OEHA in here that I've worked with over the years in here, or what she was on here earlier. And that's part of it, is how to eat fish safely, and it is branding. And so as you do this, SIA would like to help, because we have learned over the years about different ways of articulating things that people actually literally will walk away from you if you're tabling an event and you use some terminology, whereas other words like what is safe to eat will make them come to you, because you don't want to hear that something is not, they're not able to eat it. So it's a framing thing. Absolutely. And I guess this sounds to me like by moving it to safety work group that it's moving outside towards the public, where internally the bioaccumulation oversight group, I always thought it was an internal group.
Yeah, great point. I see many meetings in our future, Sherry, with connecting and collaborating. So thank you for that. I'd love to connect with you further. And yeah, that's the goal, is really, you know, this is a work group under the California Water Monitoring Council, which is open to the public. And we really want it to be, we want the public to engage and learn about all this great work that we've been talking about and how they can use the data information so that they can, you know, really make informed decisions about what is safe to eat. Making, you know, I guess pun intended, making the work group more publicly digestible. Yeah. Jay, do you have any thoughts? And also, before you chime in, just for those of you who haven't been in a meeting with me, I take silence as enthusiastic agreement about whatever I just proposed. So if you disagree, I want to hear from you. If you agree, also great. But if you don't say anything, then I'm assuming you're on board.
My dogs might bark at any second. They were just here they go.
Yeah, they have things to say about this.
That they're not silent, but they're enthusiastically supporting. No, I think it makes sense. I like the idea. One possible sort of footnote is that there might be cases where we're referring to the monitoring, like the swamp, like really something that's very swamp, you know, specific. And in that case, I think it's good to refer to as a swamp product.
Yeah.
And you know, the BOG doesn't help there either. I don't think it's better to, you know, refer to the, you know, the bioaccumulation monitoring. I think in general is just swamp monitoring.
Yeah.
So that's just one caveat.
Yeah, and I think too, there's another piece of this, you know, where someone might be saying, look, this lady is the head of the bioaccumulation monitoring program, and she's trying to tell us to rebrand. I totally hear you. We've been thinking about how to make the program itself more approachable and accessible. We haven't found a good solution to the name. So they have both been like intertwined and interchanged for very good reasons. And I think at this point, we're trying to tease things apart to make the relationship between the program and the work group more clear and understandable. And part of that will be exactly what you said, Jay, is making sure that we associate products with the right entity. But, you know, again, the partnership is still there. There's still close relationships. We just want to be more clear and understand with and transparent with what we're doing. Okay, great. So then an action item for me. Oh,
there's a comment. Do you see the chat?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Yeah, so Robert Mackey made a great point of liking the name change, but having concerns about declaring anything as being quote unquote safe and a potential liability. And yeah, that's a notable concern. And I think that's one of the reasons too why we have such a close partnership with OEHA that is the authority of declaring whether or not a thing is safe or not through their fish consumption advisories. And so continuing to nurture that partnership so that we can stay away. Also, you know, using the word safer as Sherry suggested, is a great thing that we can do in our documentation and things like that. Great point.
Yeah, I would just couldn't remember exactly what OEHA terminology, what they use, and they use Good Catch California for their fish advisory.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is kind of a council issue. They've, well, now I'm trying to think of where did the name come from, but they've got this, they've got the portal on is it safe to eat fish and shellfish. So they use that safe. They're using that term safe. So I think it trickles down to us, and if they would need to change it, they would need to decide to change it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing too is kind of taking a both and approach with the word safe and safer is, the name of the work group is consistent with all the other work groups under the council, but when we, have documentation or brochures or whatever, we can kind of modify the language slightly to make it more approachable, as Robert and Sherry suggested. And I see Chad's hand is raised. What's up, Chad? What are your thoughts?
So I don't really have a problem with rebranding. My only thought is to not lose sight of historically the BOG also focused on bioaccumulation impacts to aquatic life. So it wasn't just a safe for eat perspective. So I would just caution against losing that perspective in the bioaccumulation work.
Yeah, great point. And that would still be a priority for the program, which again works very closely with the work group. So yeah, I think that isn't an issue of losing sight of that. And Sherry also added a comment to the chat mentioning that OEHA recommended that they change to safer in their materials, since we were providing information we got from the BOG portal, and not all species and locations had complete sample sets. Yeah, and that's a great point. And acknowledging that there are still data gaps, right? So we can't say absolutely that all the things are safe in all the places or not. And so that nuance is going to be really important as we develop more communication and outreach resources. Jeff noted that they think BOG is more accurately descriptive of the program and safe to eat is confusing. And I think that really speaks to the change and being able to articulate the difference between the program and the work group. So the bioaccumulation monitoring program is still its own thing, and the safe to eat work group is a separate entity, but they're very close partners. The program pays for all of the work group, the sampling that we talk about during this work group. So yeah, that's a great point. And it sounds like making sure that we continue to keep making those distinctions to help things stay clear and less confusing is an important goal that we should keep pursuing. So thanks, Jeff, for that. I'm not sure where we are on time. I think I had a bunch of quick agenda items.
Yeah, we had 10 minutes for this one, so
yeah,
we're
I'll keep it moving.
Yeah.
Great. So, and if you still have, I do want to keep moving, and for the sake of time and respecting the time for the rest of the meeting, but please keep adding your thoughts to the chat or email me directly. I'm happy to talk more about this. I think at this point, though, we will be, it sounds like there's no visceral objection to rebranding, just caution and needing to be sure that we're consistent with our language and keep things transparent and easy to understand for folks. So I think that action item for me will be to work on revising the SWAMP web pages and the council web pages to make sure that the SWAMP web pages say bioaccumulation monitoring program, and the council web pages and resources refer to the Safe to Eat work group. And then also, I think an action item for all of us will be when we're talking to folks about this work, switching our language. I still refer to us as the BOG because we have been for so long. But you know, working on that change will be something that we all need to practice moving forward. And so outreach materials, I think during the January meeting, we had a great recommendation from the Moss Landing team about developing an angler brochure and or booklet or postcard or something that they can hand out to folks while they're at the docks and collecting sampling collecting samples to get a better understanding of what the heck they're doing out there and what the bioaccumulation program or Safe to Eat work group are and how they can help anglers. And so, excuse me, we have, we have been working with the team to develop those resources and kind of have a general idea of what we're thinking of. It started off for this particular resource as being a postcard with high level information and then lots of online resources that people could go and visit. We also want to be cognizant of and acknowledge that not everyone speaks English, and so providing resources in multiple languages and improving that accessibility to the information that we're sharing is a key priority for us. And so this is a very excuse me, general mock-up of a booklet that we're actually trying to develop. So there's just a couple of paragraphs on what the bioaccumulation monitoring program is and how asking the angler how they consume fish, so we can kind of factor that into understanding where we might sample in the future, and then providing lots of resources and links to the Safe to Eat portal, the OEHA California Fish Advisory Map, the program webpage, and then of course our Safe to Eat work group. And so offering this in multiple languages, there would be English, Spanish, Tagalog, traditional Chinese, and then I think there's like a more, I can't remember the name of how we refer to language, but a more commonly used Chinese, and then Korean, Hmong, and then a bunch of the collaboration logos, but it'll be a booklet, I think like 8 by 5, something like that, that folks can kind of like fold up and put in their pocket. And there's a link to this, this kind of example and links to the other things that we'll be mentioning in a moment and the agenda, and there'll be links in the notes. And if possible, we'd really like the booklet to be finalized in the next couple of weeks so we can get it printed and shipped and out in the field. So if you have feedback on language or anything like that that we're using, please let me know and we can kind of work on revisions for that. I also mentioned a survey that is a Google survey, Google form that is based on fish consumption surveys that have happened in the past, like more rigorous fish consumption surveys. We've tried to shorten and use really the only the essential questions just to get a better idea of how anglers use and consume their catch. And so here's a link to the actual form, and then I'm gonna open a link of the questions, which again, you have access to all of these things. And so if you have thoughts on the types of questions that we're asking, how we can revise them to make it more approachable, please let me know. Please contact me. And so basically, we just want to know a little bit about them, where they like to fish, generally speaking, in terms of like water bodies, but then also where in the water body, how often they fish, when do you tend to go fishing, what you like to fish for, and how you consume your catch, how often, if you share it with anyone, and then whether or not you're aware of advisories, as you're taking the survey, because maybe there's an advisory there that they're not aware of, and that tells us that we need to do a little bit better about communicating those things to folks. Yes, and Sherry, I will send you, I'll add a link to the chat in a moment, and I'll connect with you via email. Okay, am I back? Yes, okay, great. Sorry, tech issues, we know the meeting's real. Thanks, Corey, for adding my email in the chat. And then Sherry has a question about if we filled out another survey, it helps the state to see if, oh, okay, gotcha. If they're providing duplicate information. Yeah, that's a great question to add. And I know there's also efforts to have a consumption survey specifically targeted for tribal groups in development, I think in Northern California. Yeah, great thoughts. The last but not least item that we've been working on is a fact sheet. So much more than a brief survey or something you can stick in your pocket. But this will be provided online, and trying to keep it to, one page front and back, or a 2-pager. Going over, what is bioaccumulation? We wanted to provide a graphic to kind of make that concept a little bit more approachable. It's in development. We haven't started working on it yet. What's the bioaccumulation monitoring program? What's the work group? How the heck do they work together? Why are there two things when you're trying to talk about one concept? Who are all of our collaborators? And this is just a high-level list of agencies, and hopefully over time we can add more logos to the list and increase our collaboration with Sherry and others. And then kind of explaining when we're out monitoring, what are we doing, and what do we do with the information and data once we kind of process it, and then how we help anglers. So one key point that I wanted to kind of elevate here is I snagged this OEHA visual from the internet, and so OEHA folks, please let me know if there's other visuals that you would prefer we use. And also if we can use them. Yeah, please provide feedback on that and make sure that we're reflecting the OEHA work appropriately. But basically that is talking about the fish consumption surveys that we all work to develop. And then how anglers can help the program. So again, going back to that survey, and there's a QR code scanner or QR code that someone can scan with their phone, as well as links that people can click to kind of access that survey. And then additional resources. And so that's the gist, excuse me, of the fact sheet. And again, links to all of these things will be provided in the notes. And I think they were provided also in the agenda. Maybe not. I might not have had them ready by then. But we want your feedback. So if you have thoughts, constructive criticism, suggestions for improvement, please send them my way. Again, Corey put my email in the chat. And yeah, that's all I have for these outreach materials at this point. And then to note that this is just the beginning. We will continue to develop more resources as we have more time and we learn lessons from the realignment and things and our general sampling and things like that. So if you have ideas for additional resources, then please also let me know about that, and that we can kind of add it to our to-do list of resources to provide to different audiences. And another thing to note for the fact sheet, we will be providing it online in all the same languages as we did, as I mentioned, for the Angler booklet. So, I think seven different languages, and we'll have links to all the things. Any feedback right now? I know maybe this is probably the first time any of you have heard of these things or seen them, so you might need to kind of take a look after and digest and get back to me. Okay. Great.
Anna, one thought. I'm wondering if we could get information on, like, I'm curious about what, like, if we hand this out to an angler on a certain water body, it'd be specifically good to know if they know about the advice for that water body. So there's a, an expansion of that question about advisories that could do that. I don't have the, explicit suggestion on it, but it'd be nice to know about that.
Yeah. And again, this is kind of somewhere between a formal survey and crowdsourcing, right? We, as many of you know, conducting consumption surveys can be very costly and time intensive. And so we're hoping that by kind of utilizing a higher level, lighter touch type survey, we'll have to understand the limitations of that the type of data that comes in. But when you get enough, you can still kind of start to see trends and tease out and make inferences about general consumption trends throughout the state. So yeah, all good points.
Maybe something like, are you aware of an advisory for the water bodies you fish on, or something like that? That's something that we have tried to provide through the portal. Like, if people are actually using the portal to get information on the water bodies they fish, we hit them with the advisory information if it's available. So I'm curious if anybody's getting that, probably not in a big way from us, but just whether they're aware of that.
Yeah, great point. And then Sherry, I see your hands raised.
Okay, so I'm really happy that you guys are doing this. I didn't know you were doing it, so I'm really glad I'm in this meeting. We ask fish consumption questions. We have a more robust survey than the one that Frasian did. We worked with several tribes, probably about 12 actually, to revise that survey. So I would love to be engaged in this to do it, because the biggest fear the tribes would have their repressed rates, that we would be locking in repressed rates of consumption. So those questions have to be really worded correctly. And Jay's piece about asking if they already know about their fish consumption survey, or if they, maybe more generally, do they know about fish? I'm trying to figure it out, but I'll work with that later. But the deal is that there are a lot of people that don't eat fish because they've been told that there's mercury in the fish. SEA has been giving information out since 2003. We'll have people actually send us our own brochures at tabling events and saying, oh yeah, I carry this around with me, which means they're getting the information, and then we check to see if they're interpreting it in a way that's going to keep them from eating fish or push them towards the fish that are safer to eat. So there's a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to this, and keep me in the loop, please.
Yes, yes, we'll do. Thank you so much. And I think I am also the tribal coordinator for the Office of Information Management Analysis. I'm connected with Chuck Striplin, and I think he mentioned the tribal survey that that was in the works or in progress, and so I've heard of it, but
right. We're supposed to work in the North District with Chuck Striplin, but he's taken a different job, and I don't know who the new person is up there.
Yeah.
Sounds like you and I have a lot of reasons to talk in the future.
Yeah, yeah, lots of reasons. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, great. The next thing, we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but I just wanted to provide an update on where we are with the realignment efforts. So we talked a little bit about the budget before and the general intention. The timeline has been revised slightly and pushed out, just because we want to, I think for me, I'm leading it and I want to do it well versus do it fast. And so we pushed the timeline out to make sure that we can go through the more formal processes of inviting tribal governments to engage with us and participate in this process with us. And as well as just coordinating everyone's schedules. We're trying to get, a swath of agencies represented that are involved in the bioaccumulation work, from Fish and Wildlife to OEHA to the U.S. Forest Service to California Department of Public Health, as well as a good representation from community-based organizations, which we really have in the San Diego region, as well as tribal governments and advocacy groups, and coordinating what's called, we'll round it up to like 20 different folks. The schedules of all those folks is a little bit challenging, but we do have our first meeting scheduled for June 25th, just to kind of touch base, introduce ourselves to everyone else on the team, and start thinking about and talking about, the different needs that are coming up. And we're going to be focusing a lot of this year on continuing that conversation and identifying the needs, species, water bodies, contaminants, all of that good stuff, so that we can develop a sampling plan and be prepared to sample for next year, which will happen in 2022. And then we'll kind of, once we start to get some of the information and data from the sampling, we'll also, connect and talk about, okay, so what are the best ways to communicate this information to your respective communities? And we'll start again in a different region. So the little blue arrows on this slide are specific committee meetings. Generally speaking, they might shift due to schedules and other needs, but very confident on where we're headed, and the folks that have already agreed to join the committee for the San Diego region are all really great representations of different communities in San Diego, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversations, and I'll continue to report out, progress and things like that at future work group meetings. Are there any questions on the realignment at this point? Okay, great. And there's in the notes, and then also in the agenda, there's a link to the website that we'll be maintaining that will also kind of have this timeline as well as other updates to sampling plans and products that we develop as the committee progresses. So yeah, so we've confirmed the funding mechanisms for community. The region recommended, the regional board and the regional tribal liaison recommended, because this is, you know, a partnership between the state board and the regional board. And we've received confirmation from many of those, almost all of the people that we reached out to. And I did mention before, we've confirmed that we'll be having a professional facilitator help us through this process. And we shifted the initial engagement and then revised the timeline. Great. Yeah, and so that's all I have for that item. And I think we're good with time to start wrapping up. So the next couple slides are just kind of reviewing action items. I didn't notice any from the quick updates. For item 3, we have Jay that will distribute the report to the work group on the 4th, and then folks will submit their comments to Jay by the 25th, and then we'll get the final out. I can't remember that date, Jay, if you can help me out.
July 30th, I think, end of July.
Great.
And there was an action item from Jennifer on the quick updates to add the once we have the sampling plan update finalized, add that to the database. The database coding.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, sorry, we're going back and forth. I want to make sure I capture things. So for the sampling plan, item 4 that we discussed earlier, Autumn is going to review the plan and provide feedback. Jay is going to finalize the plan and distribute to the work group. And then Autumn and Jennifer are going to work together to add the sampling plan information into the database, so that's connected when the data comes in. And then for planning for 2022 and beyond, both Jay and I have an item to connect with Sherry and others regarding collaboration opportunities. And then I think for me, most of it was just kind of like keeping tabs, and we're going to continue this conversation. But were there any other action items that you saw, Jay, for planning?
Yeah, I had asked Jay to look at the National Lake sites and compare them to the regional sites.
Yeah, the regional board extra lake list.
Yep.
And then kind of the general things are to more definitively nail down the budget and then have a longer discussion about the long-term plan.
Great. And Lauren, I see your hands raised. What did I miss?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if for some reason the sampling cannot occur in 2022, that I know that as soon as possible so that I can release those funds. So getting, you know, maybe we need to have a conversation offline and get a draft design done. And, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, but, you know, from the regional perspective, I want to know that sooner than later so I can free up those funds if needed, or go ahead and move those funds over so that we can, you know, so that it's secured for our use in 2022.
Great. Thanks. why we need the whole team, so we can get all the things. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Was there someone else that was trying to say something? No? Okay. And I will clean up these slides, and they will be provided on the website and through email. So we'll be sure that everyone can see what they're seeing now. Leah Holden asks, who are the boots on the ground samplers in the field collecting data? And those folks we contract with the Marine Pollution Studies Lab at Moss Landing Marine Labs. And then there's also, I think, lots of regional support.
AKA the Marine Pollution Studies Lab.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it. They've been, you know, I mentioned Gary Ichikawa earlier. He goes back to the State Mussel Watch program in the 1970s. He's a state treasure.
He knows a thing or two about sampling, right?
Collecting fish and bivalves, yeah. But yeah, they've been doing this for a long time, and they do a really great job.
Great, thanks. So for rebranding, the action item for me is to begin to update the web pages accordingly. And as we develop outreach materials, to use the Safe to Eat work group language instead of the, we'll call it vintage terms of bioaccumulation oversight group. And then we'll send out the links to the outreach materials. And if you have any additional revisions, if you could send them to me by June 8th. So it's a couple weeks, especially for the booklet and the survey, so that we can kind of get those out into the world. The fact sheet we can, revise and take a little bit more time, but we on the website and distributed widely as well. So June 8th for feedback on that. And then I will update all the materials and facilitate getting the language translations, making sure they're accessible so we can put it on our website, and then shipping the booklets to the Moss Landing folks so they have it on their person when they're out in the field and can hand it out to members of the public. Go ahead.
On item 7, I just, you mentioned the action item to follow up with Sherry, and just, I'm really glad I happened to have a conversation with Sherry a couple days ago, and that she joined the meeting and provided all this great input. And, we look forward to talking with you more about, your experience with outreach materials.
I'm really happy to be joined in while we're still doing the work, not in coordination. So let's coordinate. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Jay. For the realignment plan, I'm going to continue to reach out and connect with additional tribes to make sure that there's equal representation on the Community Advisory Committee. And then, again, continue to provide updates as we learn through this process. And then for the wrap up and adjourn, we spoke during the last meeting about, brainstorming additional topics and speakers and things that you want to see at future meetings. So just kind of reminding everyone of that agenda item, where if you know of a speaker or a topic that you think would be great for this work group, please let Jay or I know so we can kind of get it on the agenda. And then Jay and I will work on cleaning up the meeting notes and the slides and things like that, and sending everything out, as well as this recording, and also posting it on the BOG meetings page in the next week or so. Did I miss anything else?
I don't think so. I think it's a great list.
Okay, awesome. We don't have that much work to do, right, Jay? And then speaking of the next meeting, we kind of just wanted to take a minute to think about the certain items that we've already begun to discuss. And we like to keep the meetings short and sweet. I know that all of us are on meetings all the time, and so zoom out or getting zoomed out is a real thing. So we've got again quick updates, potentially talking about the organics data over the past couple of years and getting update on that, planning for 2022 and beyond. Potentially another realignment update. We'll have more to talk about on lessons learned by then. And we have some wiggle room. So if there are items that we should add to this list, does anything come to mind for you, Jay, or anyone else?
Something that may fit into the quick updates, or if we talk about, like, I'm not sure if we'll be ready with 2019 report for this next meeting, but just we should lay out the data flow timeline, and it kind of ties in with the organics data update. But just in general, what do we anticipate for each step along the way of generating the data and getting it publicly accessible?
Yeah, okay, great. I'll add that in. And then this isn't a final agenda. We will obviously work between now and the next meeting and finalize it and send that out. And so the next meeting is on August 25th. Again, in the morning, we're kind of holding the 9:30 to 12:30 slot on the calendars, but we'll adjust it just as we did today, as the agenda requires. Meaning it might get shorter, but will not get longer for the meeting. And then after that, it'll be October 27th. If you're on the email list, you should have already received a calendar invite. If not, please let me know and I can forward that to you. It'll have the login information and agenda and all of that good stuff. And I think that's all I've got. Anything else for you, Jay?
No, just I think everyone can see that we're better organized now with you as co-chair. So thank you for
that. No worries. Happy to help. Great. Well, thanks everyone for hanging around and engaging and adding your thoughts. It's been a really productive meeting today. And we'll get those notes out and work on those next steps as soon as we can. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good afternoon. Bye, y'all.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.